In an elite clinic, a millionaire surgeon sees a homeless boy make his paraplegic daughter smile for the first time in years. Moved by this miraculous moment, he discovers that the boy turned his pain into joy to heal others. But a custody battle and decades of suspicion threaten to tear the new family apart. What begins as an unlikely encounter becomes a global fight to prove that a smile can change the world.
If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Dr. William Anderson stared out the window of his office on the top floor of the Anderson Neurological Institute in Boston. From his vantage point, he could see the entire medical district, a kingdom he had built from the ground up over 20 years of relentless work and sacrifice. At 45, Will, as his closest friends called him, had everything a man could want: a thriving private practice that catered to celebrities and politicians, a sprawling mansion in Beacon Hill, and enough money to last several lifetimes. Everything except what mattered most: his daughter's smile. Will's eyes drifted to the silver-framed photograph on his mahogany desk. 6-year-old Emma, with her mother's golden hair and his own piercing blue eyes, sat frozen in time, her laughter captured forever on a beach in Cape Cod. That was before the accident. Before the drunk driver who took Elizabeth from them and left Emma's small body broken, her spine damaged. Before the light disappeared from his little girl's eyes. Dr. Anderson. His assistant Rebecca knocked softly on the door. "The board meeting is starting in 5 minutes. "Thank you," Will replied, straightening his tie. Another meeting about expansion, about more money, more prestige. None of it mattered anymore. 2 years had passed since the accident, and Emma had not laughed once. Not a single smile had crossed her face as she sat in her wheelchair, staring blankly at the world. The best therapists in the country had tried everything. Nothing worked. Emma had retreated into herself, a shell of the vivacious child she once was. Will gathered his papers, preparing for another meaningless discussion about profit margins, when his phone rang. "Dr. Anderson? It's Mrs. Jenkins." The elderly housekeeper's voice trembled with an emotion Will couldn't immediately identify. "You need to come to Massachusetts General right away. It's Emma." Will's heart stopped. "What happened? Is she hurt?" "No, sir. You need to see this for yourself." Will had broken every speed limit between his office and Massachusetts General Hospital, where Emma attended her weekly physical therapy sessions. He sprinted through the hospital corridors, his white coat flapping behind him, heart pounding with fear. He found Mrs. Jenkins, the stern 60-year-old widow who had run his household since Elizabeth's passing, standing outside the hospital's courtyard garden. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face. "Mrs. Jenkins, what?" She simply pointed toward the courtyard. "Look." Will followed her gaze, and what he saw made his knees weaken. Emma was in her wheelchair beneath a flowering dogwood tree, but she wasn't alone. A small boy, no more than 8 years old, was performing what appeared to be an elaborate pantomime in front of her. The boy was painfully thin, his clothes little more than rags, his feet bare despite the cool spring air. His wild mop of dark hair hadn't seen a brush in weeks, and his face was smudged with dirt. But none of that mattered, because Emma, his silent, broken little girl, was laughing. Not just a polite smile or a quiet chuckle, but full-bodied, head-thrown-back laughter that rang across the courtyard like the most beautiful music Will had ever heard, the sound he'd thought he might never hear again. "Who is he?" Will whispered, afraid to break the spell. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. "Nobody knows. Security says he just wandered in off the street. They were about to escort him out when Emma saw him and, well..." She gestured helplessly at the miracle unfolding before them. The boy was now balancing a hospital apple on his nose while crossing his eyes, and Emma's laughter grew even louder. A small crowd had gathered, nurses, doctors, patients, all watching in amazement as the Princess of Anderson. Neurological, the girl whose tragedy had been whispered about in Boston medical circles for 2 years, came alive again. Will stood transfixed, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The boy finished his performance with an exaggerated bow that sent him tumbling forward in a deliberate somersault. He popped back up with his arms spread wide, and Emma applauded wildly, her face glowing with joy. That's when the boy noticed the audience. His smile faltered for a moment, a flash of wariness crossing his features before the grin returned, slightly more guarded. He gave Emma a little wink and turned to leave. "Wait!" Will called out, finally finding his voice. He approached, slowly, as one might a skittish animal. The boy tensed, clearly considering bolting, but held his ground. Up close, Will could see that the situation was even worse than it appeared from a distance. The boy's thin t-shirt had holes in it, his jeans were held up by what looked like a piece of twine, and his bare feet were calloused and dirty. But his eyes were extraordinary. Large, expressive brown eyes that sparkled with intelligence and a depth of understanding that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Thank you," Will said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "For making my daughter laugh." The boy shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "She looked sad. Nobody should be that sad." He spoke with surprising eloquence for a child his age, despite the slight rasp in his voice that suggested he didn't use it often. Emma wheeled herself forward. "Dad, this is Noah. He can do magic tricks and make funny faces, and he knows how to talk to squirrels." Her voice, unused for so long except for necessary communication, bubbled with excitement. Will felt tears threatening. 2 years of expensive specialists, and this barefoot boy had accomplished what none of them could. "Noah," Will repeated, extending his hand formally. "I'm Dr. Anderson, Emma's father." The boy hesitated, then quickly wiped his palm on his ragged pants before shaking Will's hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." His manners were surprisingly refined, at odds with his appearance. "Noah was just leaving," said a stern voice behind them. A security guard had approached, his expression a mixture of disapproval and embarrassment. "I apologize, Dr. Anderson. We don't know how he got in, but he'll be escorted out immediately." Noah's face fell, but he nodded resignedly, as if this treatment was something he was accustomed to. "No," Will said firmly. "He's my guest." The security guard blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "You heard me. He's here at my invitation." The lie came easily. Will turned back to Noah. "Have you had lunch?" Noah's eyes widened slightly before he controlled his expression. "I'm not hungry," he said, but his stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, betraying him. Emma giggled again, and the sound was like a key unlocking something in Will's chest. "Dad, can Noah come home with us? Please? He told me he knows 100 jokes, and I've only heard 23 so far." Will looked at the boy, this mysterious child who had appeared from nowhere and brought his daughter back to life, and made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. "Noah, would you like to come have dinner at our house tonight?" The boy looked suspicious, as if waiting for the punchline to a cruel joke. "Why?" "Because you made my daughter laugh," Will said simply. "And I'd like to thank you properly." Mrs. Jenkins made a small noise of protest behind him, but Will ignored it. He could feel her disapproval radiating like heat. A street urchin in their immaculate Beacon Hill mansion. It was unthinkable. But Emma was smiling, actually smiling, and looking at the boy as if he'd hung the moon and stars. "Please, Noah?" she asked. Something in the boy's expression softened as he looked at Emma. "Okay," he agreed finally. "But I gotta be back at the park before dark. That's when the mean dogs come out." Will felt his heart constrict. Mean dogs? What kind of life did this child lead? "We'll make sure you're safe," he promised, though he was already thinking about how to learn more about this mysterious boy who had accomplished the impossible. "Mrs. Jenkins, would you please bring the car around?" As the housekeeper left, still shaking her head in disapproval, Will watched Noah crouch down beside Emma's wheelchair. Want to see one more trick before we go? The boy asked, pulling a slightly crushed dandelion from his pocket. Emma nodded eagerly, and Noah held the dandelion up dramatically. This is a magic wishing flower, he explained seriously. You make a wish and blow, and if all the fuzzy parts fly away, your wish comes true. Will watched as his daughter closed her eyes tightly, made a silent wish, and blew with all her might. The dandelion seeds scattered in the spring breeze, dancing away across the courtyard. All gone, Noah announced. Your wish is going to come true for sure. Emma beamed at him. I wished that you could be my friend forever. Noah's smile faltered for just a moment, a flash of something ancient and sad crossing his young face. Forever's a long time, he said quietly, but I can be your friend today. And in that moment, Will knew he would move heaven and earth to make sure that today stretched into many tomorrows. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something that had been absent from his life since the accident. Hope. Mrs. Jenkins's disapproval was palpable as they pulled up to the Anderson mansion in Beacon Hill. The imposing 3-story brownstone, with its wrought iron fence and manicured garden, stood as a monument to success and privilege. As the elderly housekeeper helped Emma from the car, her eyes kept darting to Noah, who stood on the sidewalk, mouth agape at the sight of the house. It's like a castle, he whispered, clutching the small backpack Will had insisted on buying him at the hospital gift shop. The bag contained only a toothbrush, a clean t-shirt, and a pair of socks. The boy had refused anything more despite Will's offers. You live here? Noah asked Emma, his voice filled with awe. Emma nodded proudly. Wait till you see inside. We have a special elevator for my chair and a movie room, and the biggest kitchen ever. Mrs. Jenkins cleared her throat pointedly. Dr. Anderson, perhaps I should prepare the boy something to eat in the kitchen while you and Miss Emma retire to the sitting room. Will recognized the suggestion for what it was, an attempt to segregate their unexpected guest from the formal areas of the house. That won't be necessary, Mrs. Jenkins. Noah will dine with us in the dining room. Very well, sir, she replied, her pinched expression making it clear that she anticipated disaster. I'll set an extra place. As they entered the house, Will noticed Noah hesitating at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. It's all right, Will encouraged gently. Come in. Noah took a deep breath and stepped inside, immediately freezing in place. When his feet touched the expensive Persian rug in the foyer, Will watched as the boy's eyes darted around, taking in the crystal chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the original oil paintings on the walls. Maybe I should take my shoes off, Noah said, then flushed. I don't have shoes. My feet are dirty, though. Will felt something twist in his chest. Don't worry about that. The rugs can be cleaned. He gestured toward the guest bathroom. But if you'd like to wash up before dinner, you're welcome to use that bathroom. Noah nodded gratefully and disappeared into the bathroom. Will heard the water running and exchanged a look with Emma, who was beaming with excitement. He's nice, isn't he, Dad? And so funny. Will smiled, crouching beside her wheelchair. He certainly is. Emma, do you remember how to get to the dining room from here? Emma nodded proudly. She'd only recently begun navigating the house independently in her wheelchair. A small victory in her rehabilitation. Good. Why don't you head there and help Mrs. Jenkins set the table? I'd like to speak with Noah privately for a moment. Emma frowned slightly. You're not going to make him leave, are you? No, sweetheart. I just want to get to know him a little better. Satisfied, Emma wheeled herself down the hallway toward the dining room. Will waited outside the bathroom, hearing the water shut off. When Noah emerged, his face and hands were scrubbed clean, his wild hair somewhat tamed by water. The transformation was remarkable. Without the layer of dirt, he was a strikingly handsome child with high cheekbones, thick eyelashes, and warm, brown skin that suggested Hispanic heritage. Noah, before we join Emma and Mrs. Jenkins for dinner, I was hoping we might talk for a minute, Will said, gesturing toward his study. The wariness returned to Noah's eyes, but he nodded and followed Will into the book-lined room. Will closed the door partway and took a seat not behind his imposing desk, but in one of the leather armchairs by the fireplace, gesturing for Noah to take the other. The boy perched on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt at any moment. "First, I want to thank you again for what you did today," Will began. "It's been 2 years since I've heard Emma laugh like that." Noah shrugged. It wasn't hard. She wanted to laugh. She just forgot how. The simple wisdom of the statement struck Will. "You're very perceptive for your age. How old are you, Noah?" 8. Almost 9. "And do you live with your parents nearby?" A shadow crossed Noah's face. "My parents are gone. There was a flood in our apartment building. I was at school." Will tried to recall any recent flooding disasters in Boston, but couldn't remember anything significant. "I'm very sorry to hear that. So who takes care of you now?" Noah looked down at his hands. "I take care of myself." "Surely there must be someone, a relative, a foster home?" "There was my Aunt Patty, but she said I was too much like my dad, too loud, too happy all the time." His voice grew quieter. "She said it wasn't normal to be happy after what happened, that I should be sad like her." Will felt a chill run through him. "And where is your aunt now?" "She moved to Chicago with her new boyfriend. She said she'd come back for me, but that was last summer." Noah's tone was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. "It's okay, though. I'm good at finding places to sleep and food to eat." "Noah, are you telling me you've been living on the streets? For how long?" The boy shrugged again. "Since the flood. Sometimes people let me stay with them for a while, but it never lasts." He looked up, meeting Will's gaze directly. "Adults don't like kids who don't have parents. They think we're broken somehow." The unfairness of it burned in Will's throat. "You don't seem broken to me." Noah smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "That's because you're Emma's dad. She's a little broken on the outside, but not on the inside. So, you understand." Will was momentarily speechless. This child, this homeless orphan, who by all rights should be bitter and hardened by his experiences, instead possessed a clarity and compassion that many adults never achieved. "Noah, what would you think about staying here for a while? We have plenty of room, and Emma would love to have you around." The hope that flashed across Noah's face was quickly masked by suspicion. "Why would you want me to stay? You don't even know me." "I know that you made my daughter laugh when no one else could. I know that you've somehow managed to keep your spirit intact despite terrible circumstances." Will leaned forward. "And I know that no child should be sleeping in parks worried about mean dogs." Noah considered this, his young face serious. "What about the lady, Mrs. Jenkins? She doesn't like me." Will sighed. "Mrs. Jenkins is very protective of our home. She'll come around once she gets to know you." "I don't think so," Noah said with the certainty of someone who had faced rejection many times before. "People like her never change their minds about kids like me." Before Will could respond, there was a knock at the study door, and Mrs. Jenkins herself appeared. "Dinner is served, Dr. Anderson." Her eyes flickered to Noah with undisguised disapproval. "Miss Emma is waiting." "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. We'll be right there." Will stood and offered his hand to Noah. "Shall we?" Noah hesitated, then took Will's hand. His small fingers were calloused and tough, the hands of a child who had known hard work and hardship. Together, they walked to the dining room where Emma waited, practically bouncing in her wheelchair with excitement. The dinner that followed was unlike any the Anderson house had seen since Elizabeth's passing. Noah, initially overwhelmed by the formal table setting, "Why are there 3 forks?" quickly adapted and began regaling them with stories and jokes that had Emma in constant peals of laughter. Even Mrs. Jenkins, despite her rigid posture and tight-lipped expressions, occasionally had to turn away to hide a reluctant smile. After dessert, Noah taught Emma a simple card trick using the deck he pulled from his tattered backpack. The secret, he explained seriously, is to make them watch your right hand while your left hand does the magic. Will watched them, his heart fuller than it had been in years. A plan was forming in his mind, but he would need help. As Noah and Emma continued their game, he slipped away to his study and picked up the phone. James? It's Will Anderson. I need a favor. How much do you know about emergency foster care placement? James Wilson, Will's longtime friend and attorney, was silent for a moment. Will, what are you getting yourself into? Possibly the most important thing I've ever done, Will replied, watching through the doorway as Noah showed Emma how to make a shadow puppet on the dining room wall. I need to know if there's a way to keep a homeless child from being put into the system while I figure some things out. This is extremely irregular, Will. There are procedures, background checks. I know all that, but this child is special, James. He's brought Emma back to life. Another long pause. I'll see what I can do. But Will, be careful. The courts don't look kindly on wealthy people thinking they can circumvent the system, even with the best intentions. I understand, but I can't let him go back to the streets. I won't. After hanging up, Will returned to the dining room to find Mrs. Jenkins clearing the dessert plates while Noah demonstrated to Emma how to balance a spoon on the tip of her nose. Noah, Will said, it's getting late. I was thinking you might like to stay in our guest room tonight instead of going back to the park. Noah froze, the spoon clattering to the table. Really? Really. And perhaps tomorrow we could talk more about a more permanent arrangement, if you'd like. Mrs. Jenkins dropped a dessert plate, which shattered on the hardwood floor. Dr. Anderson, a word, please. Will followed the housekeeper into the kitchen, where she rounded on him with uncharacteristic ferocity. Sir, with all due respect, you cannot bring a street child into this house permanently. Think of your reputation, of the risk to Emma, of the impropriety. Mrs. Jenkins, Will interrupted gently, when was the last time you heard Emma laugh before today? The elderly woman faltered. That's hardly the point. It's exactly the point. That boy has a gift, and he's been living on the streets because the adults in his life failed him. I refuse to be another person who fails him. But you know nothing about him. He could be disturbed or dangerous or... He's a child, Mrs. Jenkins. A remarkable one. And he's staying, at least for now. Will's tone made it clear the discussion was over. In the dining room, Noah was helping Emma practice moving the spoon from her nose to her chin without using her hands, both of them giggling uncontrollably. It's impossible, Emma protested. Nothing's impossible, Noah replied, his young face suddenly serious. My dad used to say that impossible just means you haven't found the right way yet. Will leaned against the doorframe, watching them. In that moment, he made a silent promise to Noah's parents, wherever they were. Their son would not grow up alone on the streets, not if William Anderson had anything to say about it. The next morning, Will woke to the unfamiliar sound of laughter echoing through the mansion. He followed the joyful noise to the kitchen, where he found an astonishing sight. Noah was teaching Emma how to flip pancakes in the air, while Mrs. Jenkins, her hair still in curlers, watched with a mixture of horror and reluctant amusement. You have to use your wrist like this, Noah demonstrated, sending a perfectly golden pancake spinning 3 feet into the air before catching it neatly in the pan. See? Easy. Emma, seated in her wheelchair at the counter with a small frying pan adapted with special grips for her limited hand strength, attempted to mimic the motion. Her pancake rose a few inches before flopping sadly over the edge of the pan and onto the countertop. Oh, she exclaimed, disappointment evident in her voice. That's okay, Noah quickly reassured her. My first 50 pancakes ended up on the floor. Just scoop it back in and try again. Will stepped into the kitchen. Good morning. I see breakfast is an adventure today. Dad! Emma beamed. Noah's teaching me to cook. He says I can learn even from my chair. Is that so? Will raised an eyebrow at Noah, who suddenly looked uncertain. I hope it's okay, sir. Emma said she was hungry and Mrs. Jenkins was still asleep, and I know how to cook because I used to help my mom. He trailed off, worried he'd overstepped. Will noticed the boy was wearing the clean t-shirt from the gift shop, his hair damp from a shower. He looked younger, more vulnerable in the morning light, filtering through the kitchen windows. It's more than okay, Noah. Thank you for taking care of Emma. Will turned to Mrs. Jenkins, who was unsuccessfully trying to hide her softening attitude toward their guest. And good morning to you, Mrs. Jenkins. I see you've joined the Pancake Academy. The housekeeper straightened her robe with dignity. Someone had to supervise Dr. Anderson, though I must admit the boy does have a certain flair with breakfast foods. She gestured to a plate piled high with perfectly cooked pancakes, some shaped like animals. Noah made Mickey Mouse pancakes. Dad! And look! Emma proudly pointed to a misshapen one on her own plate. I made this one all by myself. It's supposed to be a turtle, Noah whispered to Will. Ah, yes, I can definitely see the turtle, Will said, his heart swelling at his daughter's pride. It had been so long since she'd shown interest in doing anything independently. Over breakfast, Will explained that his friend James, a lawyer, would be coming by to discuss Noah's situation. The boy's face immediately closed off. Am I in trouble? He asked quietly, pushing his plate away. Not at all, Will assured him. But if you're going to stay with us for a while, which we'd very much like, there are some legal matters we need to address. Noah's eyes widened. You really want me to stay? We really do, Emma said firmly, reaching for his hand. Don't. We, Dad. Will nodded. Very much so. Mrs. Jenkins cleared her throat. The guest room would need proper furnishings for a child. The decor is hardly suitable. Will and Emma exchanged surprised glances at what amounted to tacit approval from the housekeeper. Perhaps Noah could help choose some things for his room, Will suggested. Noah looked overwhelmed. I don't need anything fancy. Just a place to sleep is fine. Nonsense, Mrs. Jenkins said briskly. A growing boy needs proper furnishings, a desk for schoolwork, bookshelves, appropriate lighting. School? Noah echoed, a flicker of longing crossing his face. Will made a mental note to ask James about educational options. How long had it been since Noah had attended school regularly? After breakfast, James Wilson arrived, briefcase in hand. The distinguished attorney with salt and pepper hair had been Will's friend since medical school, when James had been dating Will's roommate. Though their paths had diverged professionally, their friendship had endured through marriages, career successes, and personal tragedies. So this is the young man you called me about, James said, shaking Noah's hand formally. I'm pleased to meet you, Noah. Noah returned the handshake with surprising gravity. Are you going to help me stay with Dr. Anderson and Emma? James glanced at Will. That's what we're going to discuss. Why don't we adults talk in Dr. Anderson's study while you and Emma get to know each other better? Noah looked uncertain until Emma tugged at his sleeve. Come on. I want to show you my collection of magic tricks that Grandpa gave me. As the children disappeared down the hallway, James followed Will into his study and closed the door. Will, what exactly are you planning here? James asked without preamble. Will sank into his chair. I want to give him a home, James, at least temporarily, but possibly permanently. James sighed heavily. This isn't like adopting a puppy, Will. There are processes, investigations, home studies, and that's assuming the boy has no living relatives who might claim him. He mentioned an aunt who abandoned him a year ago, moved to Chicago. We'll need to locate her, determine if she's relinquished custody. James opened his briefcase. I've brought the emergency foster care application. As a doctor with your reputation, you might be fast-tracked, but it's still going to take time. How much time? Best case, a few weeks. Worst case, months. And in the meantime, technically, the boy should be in a state-approved foster home. Will's jaw tightened. He's not going into the system, James, not even temporarily. Will, you didn't see what he did for Emma. 2 years of specialists, therapists, experimental treatments, nothing worked. Then this boy appears out of nowhere, and suddenly my daughter is laughing, trying to cook, engaging with the world again. Will leaned forward. I can't let him go back to the streets. I won't. James studied his friend's face. You're serious about this? Completely. Then let's get started. I'll need his full name, date of birth, any information he can provide about his parents and this aunt. For the next hour, they worked through the preliminary paperwork. Noah was brought in briefly to answer questions, his responses revealing a child far more articulate and emotionally intelligent than most 8-year-olds. He explained that his full name was Noah Anthony Thompson, born September 3rd at Boston Medical Center. His parents were Maria Vasquez Thompson and Anthony Thompson. His aunt was Patricia Thompson, his father's sister. And the flood that took your parents, James asked gently. When did that happen? Last year, April 15th. Noah's voice was steady, but his fingers twisted in his lap. It was raining for days. Our basement apartment filled up with water in the middle of the night. James made notes, his expression grave. I don't recall any major flooding events in Boston last spring. It wasn't all of Boston, Noah explained, just our building. A pipe burst and the landlord didn't fix it right. Will and James exchanged glances. This was a localized tragedy, not a natural disaster, the kind of event that might make the local news briefly before being forgotten by everyone except those directly affected. Thank you, Noah, James said kindly. You've been very helpful. Would you mind if I spoke with Dr. Anderson alone for a few more minutes? Noah nodded and left the room, closing the door carefully behind him. Will, I need to be blunt, James said once they were alone. Are you sure about this? You're still grieving Elizabeth. Emma is still recovering. Taking in a traumatized child is a massive undertaking. I've never been more certain of anything, Will replied without hesitation. You didn't see them together, James. It's like he has this gift, this ability to cut through the darkness. James nodded slowly. I'll expedite everything as much as possible. In the meantime, keep a low profile. No social media, no mentions of Noah to colleagues or at the hospital. The last thing we need is someone questioning why a prominent surgeon has an undocumented child living in his home before the proper channels have been followed. Understood. And James. Thank you. After James left, Will found Noah and Emma in the mansion's small library. Emma was showing Noah her collection of magic tricks, and he was examining each one with exaggerated amazement. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen, he exclaimed, handling a simple disappearing coin trick as if it were a priceless treasure. You're going to be better at magic than Harry Houdini. Emma beamed at the praise. Do you want to try it? Me? No way. I'd mess it up for sure. You're the magic expert. Will watched as his daughter straightened in her wheelchair. Confidence radiating from her for the first time in years. Noah had an uncanny ability to build her up, to make her feel capable and special. The next few days fell into a surprising rhythm. Noah integrated himself into the household with remarkable ease, helping Mrs. Jenkins with chores, despite her initial protests, assisting Emma with her daily physical therapy exercises, turning them into games that had her giggling through movements that normally brought tears of frustration, and generally bringing life back into the once somber mansion. Will arranged for a private tutor to assess Noah's educational level, discovering that despite his circumstances, the boy was reading at a 6th grade level, far advanced for his age. Mathematics was another story. Years of irregular schooling had left significant gaps in his knowledge. We can work with this, the tutor assured Will. He's extraordinarily bright. With consistent instruction, he could catch up within a year. On the 5th day, as Will was preparing to leave for work, he received an unexpected call from Dr. Sarah Martinez, Emma's physical therapist. "Dr. Anderson, I need you to come to today's session," she said, her voice tight with professional restraint. "There's been a development." Will's stomach dropped. "Is Emma all right?" "Yes, but it's something you need to see for yourself." An hour later, Will stood in the physical therapy room at Massachusetts General, watching in disbelief as Emma, supported between parallel bars, took 3 halting steps forward. "Again, Emma," Noah encouraged from the end of the bars. "Remember, you're a superhero in training. Superheroes don't give up." Emma's face was a mask of determination as she lifted her right foot, moved it forward, and placed it down. Then the left. 3 more steps. "She's walking," Will whispered, tears blurring his vision. "My God, she's walking." Dr. Martinez stood beside him, clipboard clutched to her chest. "I've never seen progress like this in a case with her level of spinal trauma. Never. It defies medical explanation." "It's Noah," Will said, watching as the boy performed an exaggerated victory dance that had Emma laughing even through her exhaustion. "He somehow convinced her she could do it." "Whatever he's doing, it's working. There's actual neurological improvement. The signals are getting through where they weren't before." Dr. Martinez shook her head in amazement. "I'm documenting everything. This could be significant for other cases like Emma's." As they drove home, Emma couldn't stop talking about her achievement. "Did you see me, Dad? I walked. Noah says next week I'll be able to walk all the way across the room." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Will said, his heart so full it threatened to burst. In the rearview mirror, he caught Noah's eye. The boy was quieter than usual, a shadow crossing his face. "You okay back there, Noah?" Noah nodded, but something was clearly bothering him. It wasn't until after dinner, when Emma was engrossed in a television program, that Noah approached Will in his study. "Dr. Anderson, can I talk to you about something important?" "Of course, Noah. And please, you can call me Will." Noah fidgeted with the hem of his new shirt, one of several items Mrs. Jenkins had insisted on purchasing for him, declaring that no child in this house will be dressed in rags. "There's someone coming," Noah said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who might try to take me away." Will felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean? Who's coming?" "My Aunt Patty. I saw her yesterday when we were at the hospital. She was talking to a nurse. She didn't see me, but she's looking for me. I can feel it." Will leaned forward, keeping his voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "Noah, are you sure it was your aunt? Could it have been someone who looked like her?" Noah shook his head firmly. "It was her. And she's not nice, Dr. Anderson. She doesn't understand about making people happy. She thinks it's wrong to laugh after bad things happen." Will placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Noah, I promise you, we're doing everything legally possible to keep you here with us. James is expediting the paperwork for emergency foster care." "But what if she comes before the papers are ready? What if she takes me away and Emma can't walk anymore because I'm not here to help her?" The fear in the child's eyes was heartbreaking. Will pulled him into a gentle hug. "That's not going to happen. I won't let anyone take you away from us." Even as he made the promise, Will knew it might be one he couldn't keep. If Patricia Thompson had legal custody of her nephew and wanted him back, the courts would likely side with her, regardless of Noah's wishes or the miraculous effect he was having on Emma. That night, after both children were asleep, Will called James. "We need to move faster," he said without preamble. "Noah's aunt may be back in Boston, looking for him." "I'll do what I can," James promised. "But Will, be prepared. If she has legal custody and wants the boy, it's going to be an uphill battle." Will hung up and poured himself a rare glass of scotch, staring out at the Boston skyline glittering in the distance. He'd faced many battles in his life, building his practice from nothing, fighting for innovative treatments against conservative medical boards, and the hardest of all, watching his wife slip away while trying to be strong for Emma. But something told him that the fight to keep Noah might be the most important battle of all. 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, legal consultations, and moments of pure joy that Will wished he could bottle and preserve forever. Noah had integrated himself so seamlessly into their lives that it seemed impossible he hadn't always been there. Mrs. Jenkins, initially so resistant, had become Noah's fiercest defender. Will often found them in the kitchen together, the elderly housekeeper teaching the boy her closely guarded recipes while he regaled her with stories that made her stern face crinkle with suppressed laughter. "The boy needs structure, Dr. Anderson," she informed Will one evening while Noah was helping Emma with her exercises in the specially equipped gym room Will had installed years ago. But not the kind his aunt gave him. He needs boundaries with love, not criticism. Will raised an eyebrow. "You've certainly changed your tune, Mrs. Jenkins." The housekeeper sniffed. "I recognize quality when I see it, sir. That child has a good heart. And he's brought this house back to life." She hesitated. "He reminds me of my youngest son at that age, before the accident." It was the first time Mrs. Jenkins had ever mentioned her family, despite her decades of service. Will knew better than to press for details. Emma's progress continued to astonish her medical team. What had begun as a few tentative steps between parallel bars had evolved into walking short distances with forearm crutches. Dr. Martinez had brought in colleagues to document the case, their faces reflecting disbelief and cautious excitement, as Emma demonstrated her new abilities. "She's rewriting the medical literature," Dr. Martinez told Will after a particularly successful session. "We're seeing neural regeneration that shouldn't be possible according to everything we know about spinal injuries." "What's changed?" Will asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Martinez glanced to where Noah was showing Emma how to balance assis on one crutch while giving a high five with her free hand. Her psychological state, the will to recover, the belief that she can. She shook her head in amazement. "I've always believed in the mind-body connection, but this is something else entirely." James had managed to expedite the emergency foster care application, and Will had been granted temporary custody of Noah pending a more thorough investigation. The boy's aunt had indeed returned to Boston, but so far had made no legal moves to reclaim him. "She's asking questions at his old school," James reported during one of their regular updates. "Talking to neighbors from their old building. It's only a matter of time before she traces him to you." Will had prepared for this possibility as best he could. The legal team at Anderson Neurological had been briefed and was standing by. And the mansion's security system had been upgraded. Most importantly, both children had been prepared for the possibility of Patricia Thompson's appearance. "She can't just take you," Will assured Noah one evening as they sat in the garden watching Emma practice walking between flowering shrubs. "We have legal paperwork now. She would have to challenge it in court." Noah nodded, but his eyes remained troubled. "You don't know Aunt Patty, Dr. Anderson. She doesn't like to lose, and she really doesn't like rich people." Will had tried to gather more information about Patricia Thompson, but the picture remained murky. According to Noah, she was his father's older sister, around 40 years old, unmarried, but with a boyfriend who drank a lot and yelled at the TV. She worked as a dental receptionist and had initially taken Noah in after his parents' tragedy, but had grown increasingly resentful of the boy's resilient spirit. "She said I was disrespecting my parents' memory by being happy," Noah explained, "that I should be sad all the time like she was." It was a twisted view of grief that Will, as someone who had navigated his own loss, found particularly disturbing. Children were naturally resilient, their capacity for joy even in the face of tragedy a gift, not a flaw to be corrected. The confrontation, when it finally came, was both expected and shocking in its intensity. It was a warm Saturday in June. Will had installed parallel bars in the mansion's garden, and Emma was practicing. while Noah offered encouragement and Mrs. Jenkins watched proudly. From the patio, a pitcher of lemonade at the ready for when the children finished their session. The doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence given the mansion's security gate and intercom system. "I'll get it," Will said, rising from his garden chair. "Keep going, Emma. You're doing wonderfully." He made his way through the house, a vague sense of unease growing with each step. When he opened the front door, he found a woman with Noah's dark eyes, though hers were hard and unforgiving where his sparkled with life. "Dr. William Anderson." Her voice was tight with barely contained anger. "I'm Patricia Thompson. I believe you have my nephew." Will maintained his professional composure. "Ms. Thompson, yes, Noah is here. He's been placed in my emergency foster care while the authorities investigate his case." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Emergency foster care? There's no emergency. He has family, me. I've been looking everywhere for him." "According to Noah, you left him a year ago when you moved to Chicago." "A temporary situation. I always intended to come back for him." She adjusted her purse strap, a nervous gesture at odds with her confrontational tone. "I want to see him. Now." Will hesitated. He'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed what he would say, but now found himself struggling to remain diplomatic. "Noah is currently helping my daughter with her physical therapy. Perhaps we could schedule a time." "Physical therapy?" Patricia interrupted. "What are you talking about? Is he hurt? What have you done to him?" "Nothing. My daughter Emma is recovering from a spinal injury, and Noah has been extraordinarily helpful with her rehabilitation." Patricia's expression shifted to something colder, more calculating. "I see. You're using my nephew as some kind of therapy animal for your crippled daughter." The cruelty of the statement took Will's breath away. Before he could respond, a small voice spoke from behind him. "Aunt Patty?" Will turned to see Noah standing in the hallway, his face pale but determined. Emma was visible in the garden beyond, watching anxiously from her position between the parallel bars. Patricia's expression softened fractionally. "Noah, thank God you're all right. I've been looking everywhere for you." She extended her hand. "Come on, we're going home." Noah didn't move. "This is my home now." Patricia's face darkened. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't live with strangers. I'm your family." "The Andersons are my family too." Noah's voice was quiet but steady. "And Emma needs me." "Needs you?" Patricia scoffed. "For what?" "For this," Emma called from the garden. With visible effort, she released her grip on the parallel bars and took 1, 2, 3 steps without support before grabbing the bars again, her face flushed with triumph. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "She couldn't walk at all 3 weeks ago," Noah explained, a note of pride in his voice. "The doctors said she might never walk again, but I knew she could do it. I just had to help her believe it too." Will watched Patricia's face as she processed. This information saw the moment when calculation replaced surprise. That's wonderful, Noah. You've always been so good at helping people." Her voice softened to a syrupy sweetness that made Will instantly wary. "Just like your father. He would be so proud of you." Noah tensed at the mention of his father, and Will placed a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "Ms. Thompson, why? Don't we discuss this inside?" Will suggested, unwilling to have this confrontation in full view of Emma, who was watching with increasing distress from the garden. Patricia glanced past them to where Emma stood, still holding the parallel bars, her face a mixture of fear and determination. Something shifted in the woman's expression. "Fine," she agreed tersely. Will guided them to his study, where Noah sat close to him on the leather sofa while Patricia took the chair opposite. "Noah, I know we had our differences," Patricia began, her tone carefully modulated. "But I've changed. Things are different now. I've come back to Boston permanently, found a nice apartment. I can take care of you properly." Noah looked at her skeptically. What about Rick, your boyfriend who didn't like me? Patricia's smile tightened. Rick and I aren't together anymore. It's just me now. And you're not angry that I'm happy sometimes? That I like to make people laugh? A flash of irritation crossed Patricia's face before she controlled it. Of course not, sweetie. Everyone grieves differently. I understand that now. Will could see that Noah wasn't convinced, but the boy was too polite to call his aunt a liar outright. The thing is, Aunt Patty, Noah said carefully, I want to stay here. Dr. Anderson is trying to adopt me. Patricia's facade cracked. Adopt you? That's absurd. You have family, me. She turned to Will, her voice rising. You can't just take someone's family member because you're rich and powerful. Who do you think you are? I think I'm someone who cares deeply about Noah's well-being, Will replied evenly. And I believe staying here is in his best interest. Patricia stood abruptly. We'll see what the courts have to say about that, Dr. Anderson. You may have money and connections, but I have blood ties. In the meantime, I'm taking my nephew with me today. No, you're not, Will said, rising to match her stance. Noah has been legally placed in my care while his situation is investigated. You're welcome to file for custody through the proper channels, but until then, he stays here. Patricia's eyes narrowed dangerously. You think you've won because you have fancy, lawyers and a big house. This isn't over, Dr. Anderson. Not by a long shot. She turned to Noah, who had shrunk back against the sofa cushions. I'll be back for you, Noah. Don't get too comfortable here. With that, she stormed out, brushing past Mrs. Jenkins, who had appeared in the doorway with a concerned expression. Is everything all right, Dr. Anderson? The housekeeper asked, watching Patricia's retreating figure. No, Mrs. Jenkins, I don't believe it is. Will sighed heavily. That was Noah's aunt, and I think we just declared war. Noah looked up at Will, his young face pinched with worry. She's going to try to take me away. She'll try, Will acknowledged, sitting back down beside the boy. But we're going to fight for you, Noah, with everything we have. Mrs. Jenkins nodded firmly. Indeed we will. That woman doesn't have a maternal bone in her body. Anyone can see that. Noah's eyes filled with tears. But what if she wins? What if I have to leave Emma? She's just starting to get better. Will pulled the boy into a gentle hug. One day at a time, Noah. That's how we'll handle this. And in the meantime, we'll make every day count. Later that evening, after both children were asleep, Will called James to report on Patricia's visit. She'll file for custody, James predicted grimly, and she has biology on her side. What do we have? Will asked. Money, influence, an excellent reputation, and, potentially, if we play this right, the best interests of the child. James paused. Will, are you absolutely certain about this? Taking on a custody battle will be public, messy. It could affect your practice, your standing in the community. Will thought about Noah sleeping peacefully upstairs, about the light he'd brought back into their lives, about Emma taking her first independent steps in 2 years. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, he answered. Whatever it takes, James. Whatever it takes. True to James's prediction, the legal notice arrived 3 days later. Patricia Thompson was filing for full custody of her nephew, Noah Anthony Thompson, alleging that William Anderson had used his wealth and influence to illegally separate a child from his rightful guardian. It's a strong opening move, James E. Ites admitted as they reviewed the paperwork in Will's study. She's painting you as a privileged predator using a vulnerable child for your own purposes. Will felt physically ill reading the allegations. She makes it sound like I kidnapped him. He was living on the streets, James. She abandoned him. Which she denies. According to her filing, she left Noah in the care of a neighbor while she established herself in Chicago, intending to send for him once she was settled. She claims this neighbor, a Mrs. Ramirez, was supposed to be caring for Noah, but somehow lost track of him. That's convenient, Will said bitterly. Is there even a Mrs. Ramirez? We're looking into it. But Will, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. The media will likely pick up on it. Renowned surgeon in custody battle with working-class woman. The class warfare angle alone will be irresistible to certain outlets. Will rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a migraine. How do we protect the children from this? Keep them away from the media. No public appearances. Consider homeschooling temporarily. James hesitated. And Will, you might want to consider reaching some kind of compromise with Ms. Thompson. Shared custody, perhaps. Will shook his head firmly. You didn't see her, James. The way she spoke about Emma, about Noah. She called him a therapy animal. And Emma crippled. She's bitter, angry, and resentful. Noah deserves better. Then we fight, James said simply. But be prepared for a long, difficult battle. What neither of them anticipated was how quickly the situation would escalate. The very next day, a local tabloid ran a front-page story, with the inflammatory headline, Millionaire Surgeon Collects. Orphans. Grieving aunt fights to reclaim nephew from wealthy doctor. The article was filled with quotes from Patricia, painting herself as a struggling working woman up against the powerful medical establishment. There was even a grainy photograph of Noah and Emma in the hospital garden, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from beyond the property line. How dare they? Mrs. Jenkins fumed over breakfast, throwing the newspaper into the recycling bin before the children could see it. Paparazzi stalking children. It's disgraceful. Will had already received calls from several board members at Anderson Neurological expressing concern about the negative publicity. His executive assistant reported that the clinic's social media accounts were being flooded with comments, some supportive, but many accusatory. Dr. Anderson? Noah's small voice interrupted Will's thoughts as he prepared to leave for an emergency board meeting. Are you in trouble because of me? Will crouched down to the boy's eye level. No, Noah, absolutely not. Some people just don't understand our situation, that's all. But that newspaper said mean things about you. Mrs. Jenkins didn't think I saw it, but I did. Noah's brown eyes were serious. I don't want to cause problems for you and Emma. You, listen to me, Will said firmly. You are not a problem. You are a blessing to this family. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Noah nodded solemnly. Together. As Will drove to his clinic, he couldn't shake the memory of Noah's worried face. How had something so pure, the desire to give a homeless child a loving home, become so complicated and ugly? The answer, of course, was simple. Adults. Adults with agendas, with bitterness, with cynicism that couldn't recognize or accept the transformative power of compassion and connection. Well, William Anderson hadn't built one of the country's premier neurological institutes by backing down from challenges. If Patricia Thompson and the tabloid media wanted a fight, they would get one. But first, he had a more important mission, ensuring that Noah and Emma could continue their remarkable journey of healing, shielded as much as possible from the storm, gathering around them. The media firestorm escalated with alarming speed. Within days, the story had been picked up by national outlets, each putting their own spin on the narrative. Conservative channels portrayed Will as a wealthy elitist using his power to steal a child from his rightful family. Liberal stations framed it as a class struggle, with talking heads debating whether the wealthy should be allowed to purchase children through expensive legal proceedings. None of them seemed interested in the truth that a homeless boy had found a loving home and, in the process, helped a grieving family heal. This is getting out of hand, James said grimly as they met in Will's study one evening. Outside, a small group of reporters had gathered at the gates of the mansion, cameras at the ready. Patricia Thompson has hired Gloria Stevens. Will groaned. Gloria Stevens was a publicity-seeking attorney known for taking on high-profile cases against wealthy defendants. She specialized in portraying her clients as downtrodden victims fighting against corrupt power structures. She's already scheduled a press conference for tomorrow, James continued. I managed to get an advance copy of her statement. It's incendiary. Will scanned the document James handed him, his blood pressure rising with each paragraph. Gloria would be portraying Patricia as a loving aunt who had temporarily placed her nephew with a trusted neighbor while establishing a new home, only to return and find him essentially kidnapped by a wealthy doctor who was using the boy as emotional therapy for his own damaged child. This is defamatory, Will said, his voice tight with anger. They're making it sound like I'm experimenting on these children. It gets worse, James warned. Stevens is planning to introduce a surprise witness, someone who claims to have seen you shopping for children at Boston Medical Center, allegedly approaching several homeless families before selecting Noah. That's absurd. No, Will. But in the court of public opinion, accusations like this can do tremendous damage. James leaned forward. We need to get ahead of this. I've drafted a statement of our own, focusing on Noah's welfare and Emma's remarkable progress. We'll release it an hour before Stevens's press conference. Will nodded absently, his mind racing. How are we protecting the children from all this? I've arranged for increased security at the property. The school has been notified not to release any information about either child, and I would strongly suggest keeping them home until this initial media frenzy dies down. As if on cue, Mrs. Jenkins appeared at the study door, her expression uncharacteristically flustered. Dr. Anderson, there's a situation in the kitchen you should see. Will followed her quickly, James close behind. In the kitchen, they found Emma and Noah sitting at the counter, watching something on Emma's tablet with solemn expressions. As Will drew closer, he realized with horror that they were watching a news segment about their own case. Sources close to Ms. Thompson described Dr. Anderson as a collector of vulnerable children, using his vast wealth to create what one insider called a personal zoo of trauma in his mansion. Will reached over and shut off the tablet. Emma, Noah, you shouldn't be watching this. Emma looked up, her eyes filled with tears. Is it true, Dad? Are people saying you only want Noah because he helps me walk? Noah's face was even more distressed. They're saying you might want to adopt other kids too, that you're collecting us like toys. Will felt a surge of protective rage, unlike anything he'd experienced before. These vultures were not only attacking him, but were now hurting the very children they claimed to be advocating for. He crouched down between their chairs, taking one of each child's hands in his. Listen to me, both of you. What these people are saying is not true. They don't know us. They don't know our family. But why are they saying these things? Noah asked, his voice small. Will struggled to explain complex adult motivations to children. Sometimes, when people don't understand something beautiful and special, they try to make it sound bad or wrong. They can't imagine that someone might simply want to help because it's the right thing to do. Is Aunt Patty going to take me away? Noah's question cut straight to the heart of Will's own deepest fear. We're doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen, Will promised, though the words felt hollow, even as he spoke them. The truth was, he didn't know if he could win against the combined forces of blood relation and media sensationalism. Mrs. Jenkins, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I have something to say to both of you children. She drew herself up to her full height, her dignity palpable. I have worked in this house for 25 years. I have seen many things, good times and difficult ones. And I have never, in all those years, seen this house as full of love and laughter as it has been since Noah arrived. Emma and Noah looked at the elderly housekeeper with surprise. Mrs. Jenkins rarely expressed such sentiments. Now, there are people out there saying horrible, untrue things, she continued. But we know the truth. We live it every day. And the truth is that you two belong together, just as you belong in this family. She fixed Noah with a particularly stern gaze. And I won't hear any nonsense about you causing trouble, young man. You are the best kind of trouble this house has ever seen. Noah's eyes filled with tears, but he managed a wobbly smile. Even better than when I flooded the laundry room trying to build a water slide for Emma's rubber ducks. Mrs. Jenkins's lips twitched. Marginally better. The moment of levity broke the tension, and Will silently blessed the housekeeper for her perfect intervention. James, who had been watching from the doorway, caught Will's eye and nodded toward the study, indicating they should continue their discussion privately. "Why don't you two help Mrs. Jenkins prepare dinner?" Will suggested. "I need to talk with Mr. Wilson about some grown-up things." As the children began taking ingredients from the refrigerator under Mrs. Jenkins's supervision, Will and James returned to the study. "We need a different approach," Will said immediately. "This media circus is hurting the children. I don't care what they say about me, but Emma and Noah are suffering." James nodded thoughtfully. "What if we change the narrative completely? Instead of responding defensively to each allegation, what if we showcase the positive impact Noah has had, not just on Emma, but potentially on other children with similar conditions?" Will leaned forward, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "Dr. Martinez has been documenting Emma's progress, correct? With proper privacy protocols, could that research be expanded? Could Noah's unique approach to motivation and rehabilitation be studied more formally?" A spark of inspiration ignited in Will's mind. "Project Smile," he said suddenly. "Pardon?" "Project Smile. A pilot program at Anderson Neurological studying the impact of peer-led motivation and play therapy on children with traumatic injuries." Will's excitement grew as he spoke. "We could create a structured program based on what Noah's been doing instinctively with Emma." James considered this. It would shift the focus from the custody battle to the legitimate medical research. It would be harder for Stevens to paint you as a collector if you're establishing a formal therapeutic program that could help hundreds of children. And it would give us a platform to showcase Noah's gift without exploiting him, Will added. "He's genuinely talented at connecting with other children, at motivating them in ways adults can't." "Will it be enough to counter Stevens's narrative?" James wondered. "I don't know," Will admitted. "But it's true to who we are and what we believe in. That has to count for something." Over the next week, while the legal battle intensified in both the courts and the media, Will worked with Dr. Martinez and a team of specialists to formalize the concept of Project Smile. Noah, when approached about the idea, was enthusiastically supportive. "You mean I could help other kids like Emma?" he asked, his eyes lighting up. "Kids who are sad or hurt or can't walk." "Exactly," Will confirmed. "But only if you want to, Noah. This would be completely voluntary." "I want to," Noah insisted. "My dad always said that when you make other people happy, you feel less sad yourself. That's how I got through after the flood, by trying to make other people smile." The simple wisdom of this philosophy never failed to move Will. Here was a child who had lost everything, yet instead of turning bitter or self-pitying, he had channeled his grief into bringing joy to others. The first trial session of Project Smile was arranged at Massachusetts General Hospital's Pediatric Rehabilitation Wing. With proper permissions from parents and oversight from medical professionals, Noah was introduced to 3 children with conditions similar to Emma's, spinal injuries resulting in partial paralysis. Emma insisted on coming along, proudly demonstrating her progress by walking into the therapy room with only one crutch for support. "If I can do it, you can too," she told a wide-eyed 7-year-old boy who had been paralyzed in a car accident 6 months earlier. "Noah helped me remember how to be brave." Will watched from the observation room as Noah worked his magic. Unlike adult therapists who focused on the technical aspects of rehabilitation, Noah approached each child as a potential playmate. He turned exercises into games, celebrated tiny victories with exaggerated enthusiasm, and somehow instinctively knew when to push and when to back off. "This is remarkable," Dr. Martinez murmured beside Will. "He's getting responses we haven't seen in months of conventional therapy." By the end of the 2-hour session, all 3 children had exceeded their therapist's expectations. One girl, who had refused to attempt standing for weeks, managed to bear weight on her legs for nearly a minute while playing Noah's invented game of statue freeze tag. "We need to document this systematically," Dr. Martinez said as they left the hospital. "With proper controls, data collection, longitudinal follow-up, this could be groundbreaking." Will nodded, already envisioning how Project Smile could evolve. But his momentary optimism was shattered the next morning when he opened the newspaper to find a scathing editorial criticizing the program as experimental therapy using children as both subjects and practitioners, and questioning the ethics of allowing an untrained, possibly traumatized child to influence the treatment of vulnerable patients. The author of the piece, Dr. Harold Reynolds, was a prominent psychiatrist known for his conservative views on childhood development. He described Project Smile as dangerous amateur psychology masquerading as innovation and called for an investigation into Anderson Neurological's practices. "Don't let it discourage you," James advised when Will called him about the article. "Reynolds is notoriously resistant to any approach that doesn't conform to his rigid methodologies. And he's a frequent expert witness for Gloria Stevens, so this is likely just another facet of their attack." But the damage was already spreading. By afternoon, several parents had withdrawn permission for their children to participate in future Project Smile sessions. The hospital administration was receiving concerned calls. And most devastating of all, the judge overseeing Noah's custody case had requested a formal briefing on the program, citing concerns about potential exploitation. "They're making it sound like I'm using Noah as some kind of untested medical treatment," Will said that evening, pacing his study in frustration, "when all he's doing is making children laugh and believe in themselves." Mrs. Jenkins, who had brought in his evening coffee, paused at the door. "If I may, Dr. Anderson, perhaps what's needed is not more doctors or lawyers speaking, but someone who has actually witnessed the changes in this household." Will looked up, struck by the idea. "Mrs. Jenkins, would you be willing to make a statement, as someone who initially had reservations about Noah coming here?" The elderly housekeeper straightened her already impeccable posture. "I would be honored, sir. It's time someone told the truth about what that boy has brought to this family, and it's not just Miss Emma's improved mobility." The next day, a new voice entered the public discourse surrounding the case. Eleanor Jenkins, identified as the Anderson family's housekeeper of 25 years, gave a brief but powerful interview to a respected local news channel. With quiet dignity, the 70-year-old woman described the transformation she had witnessed in the Anderson household. She spoke of Emma's progress, of course, but also of smaller, more intimate moments. Noah reading stories to Emma when nightmares kept her awake. The boy sharing his dessert with the housekeeper because "my mom always said sweets taste better when they're shared." The way he carefully arranged Emma's favorite toys in her room each morning to make her smile when she woke up. "I have raised 3 children of my own," Mrs. Jenkins concluded, looking directly into the camera. "I know the difference between a child who is being used and a child who is being loved. Noah Thompson is loved in the Anderson home, and he gives that love back tenfold." The interview went viral, shared across social media platforms with hashtags like "Let Noah Stay" and "EEOW", Project Smile. For the first time since the controversy began, the tide of public opinion seemed to be shifting. But Patricia Thompson and Gloria Stevens were not about to concede defeat. The very next day, they countered with their own emotional press conference, featuring Patricia tearfully displaying Noah's baby pictures and recounting how she had always been there for him after his parents' tragedy. "Noah belongs with his family," Patricia insisted, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "With someone who knew and loved his parents, who can keep their memory alive for him. Not with wealthy strangers who are using him as some kind of miracle cure for their own child." The custody battle had become a public referendum on privilege, grief, and the very definition of family. And caught in the middle were 2 children who just wanted to be together, to heal and grow without the harsh spotlight of adult agendas. As Will tucked the children into bed that night, Noah in the room that had been fully furnished for him, with walls painted the deep blue he had shyly requested and bookshelves filled with the adventure stories he loved. He felt a profound sense of both determination and uncertainty. "Dr. Anderson?" Noah asked sleepily as Will turned to leave. "Do you think the judge will let me stay?" Will returned to sit on the edge of the bed. "I hope so, Noah. We're doing everything we can." "I was thinking," the boy said, his voice serious despite his drooping eyelids. "Maybe if the judge could see Emma walk all by herself, with no crutches at all, then he'd understand why I need to stay." Will's heart constricted painfully. "Is that why you've been pushing Emma so hard in therapy this week, so she can walk for the judge?" Noah nodded, his expression earnest. "If she can walk all the way across the courtroom by herself, they'll have to let me stay, don't you think?" Will gathered the small boy into his arms, fighting back tears. "Oh, Noah, that's not how it works. The judge has to consider many different things." "But Emma's getting better because of me," Noah insisted, his voice muffled against Will's shoulder. "Doesn't that matter?" "It matters enormously," Will assured him, "and we're going to make sure the judge understands that. But for now, try not to worry. Just keep being the amazing boy you are." As Noah finally drifted off to sleep, Will remained, sitting on the edge of the bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of the boy's chest. In just a few short weeks, this child had become as precious to him as his own daughter. The thought of losing him was unbearable. Whatever it took, Will silently vowed he would fight to keep this newfound family together. Even if it meant putting his own reputation, career, and fortune on the line. Some things were worth any price. The morning of the custody hearing dawned with an unseasonable chill. Will found himself straightening Noah's tie for the third time, more to calm his own nerves than to improve the boy's appearance. "You look very handsome," Will assured him, smoothing the lapels of the new navy blazer that Mrs. Jenkins had insisted on purchasing for the occasion. "Very grown up." Noah fidgeted uncomfortably. "Do I have to wear the tie? It feels like it's choking me." "Just for a little while," Will promised. "The judge will want to see that we take this very seriously." From the doorway, Emma watched anxiously. She was dressed in her best dress, her golden hair pulled back with a velvet headband. In her hands, she clutched the surprise she and Mrs. Jenkins had been working on secretly for days, a scrapbook documenting Noah's time with the Andersons, filled with photographs, drawings, and Emma's carefully printed captions. "Is the judge going to ask me questions?" she asked, her voice small but determined. Will knelt beside her wheelchair. They had decided to use it for the court appearance, despite Emma's progress with walking, partly to conserve her energy, and partly because Will didn't want to create the impression that they were showcasing her abilities to influence the judge. "The judge might ask you a few questions, sweetheart. Just answer honestly, exactly the way you feel." Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm going to tell him that Noah is my brother now, not by blood, but by heart. That's what Mrs. Jenkins says." Will felt a surge of gratitude for the elderly housekeeper, who had become an unexpected but fierce advocate for keeping their newfound family intact. Her interview had sparked a wave of support from unexpected quarters, other household staff who had worked for wealthy families, teachers who had seen similar transformative friendships between children, even several prominent child psychologists, who had publicly criticized Dr. Reynolds' dismissive stance on peer-facilitated therapy. But would it be enough to counter the biological claim of Patricia Thompson? That was the question that had kept Will awake night after night. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and camera crews when they arrived. James had arranged for them to enter through a private entrance, but they still had to pass, through a gauntlet of shouted questions and flashing cameras. "Dr. Anderson, are you using Noah as an experimental treatment for your daughter? Noah, do you want to live with your aunt or Dr. Anderson? Emma, can you really walk now?" Will shielded the children as best he could, while security personnel cleared a path. Inside, they found Patricia and Gloria Stevens already seated at the plaintiff's table. Patricia dressed in a conservative suit that Will suspected had been provided by her attorney specifically for this appearance. Noah tensed at the sight of his aunt. She gave him a tight smile and a little wave, which he did not return. Remember, this is just the preliminary hearing, James whispered as they took their seats. The judge will hear initial arguments from both sides and may ask some questions. It's unlikely he'll make any final determination today. Will nodded, though the reminder did little to calm his nerves. Everything felt surreal. The formal courtroom, the court reporter preparing her stenography machine, the bailiff announcing the arrival of Judge Walter Simmons. How had a simple act of compassion led to this legal battleground? Judge Simmons, a distinguished African-American man in his 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and a reputation for fairness, regarded both parties thoughtfully before addressing the court. "I want to make something very clear before we begin," he said, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "This is not a media spectacle. This is not a referendum on wealth versus modest means. This is a proceeding to determine what is in the best interest of one child, Noah Anthony Thompson." He fixed both legal teams with a stern gaze. "I expect arguments to focus solely on that criterion. Is that understood?" Both James and Gloria Stevens nodded their agreement. "Good. Ms. Stevens, as you are representing the plaintiff with biological ties to the child, you may present your opening statement first." Gloria Stevens rose, her tailored suit and perfect fee, posture projecting confidence and authority. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case, at its heart, is about a child who has already suffered tremendous loss, being separated from his only remaining blood relative. Patricia Thompson is Noah's paternal aunt, his father's sister. After the tragic circumstances that took Noah's parents, Ms. Thompson took her nephew into her home and heart." Stevens went on to paint a picture of Patricia as a devoted aunt who had made the difficult decision to temporarily place Noah with a trusted neighbor while she established a more stable living situation in Chicago. According to this narrative, Patricia had returned to Boston as soon as possible, only to discover that her nephew had somehow ended up in the mansion of one of the city's wealthiest residents. "While we acknowledge Dr. Anderson's good intentions," Stevens continued, her voice taking on an edge, "the fact remains that he has no legal right to this child. Moreover, there are serious concerns about the manner in which Noah is being utilized in the Anderson household, specifically as an emotional support and therapeutic aid for Dr. Anderson's daughter." Will felt his blood pressure rising, but maintained his composed expression. He had anticipated this line of attack. "We will present evidence," Stevens concluded, "that Noah's place is with his aunt, the woman who shares his blood, his history, and his parents' memory. Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Simmons nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Mr. Wilson, your opening statement." James rose with the measured confidence that had made him one of Boston's most respected attorneys. "Your Honor, this case indeed hinges on what is best for Noah Thompson. And while biological connection is one factor to consider, it cannot be the only one." He proceeded to outline the circumstances under which Noah had come into the Andersons' lives, not as a planned acquisition, but as a chance encounter that had led to the discovery that the boy was effectively homeless. Ms. Thompson claims to have arranged proper care for her nephew before leaving Boston, James said, yet Noah was found sleeping in public parks, foraging for food, and without regular access to education or health care. These are not the circumstances of a child who has been properly placed with a caregiver. James then shifted to address the allegations regarding Noah's role in Emma's recovery. The relationship between Noah and Emma Anderson is not one of patient and therapist, Your Honor. It is a genuine friendship between two children who have both experienced profound loss. Yes, Emma has made remarkable progress since Noah came into her life, but Noah has equally benefited from finding stability, education, and a loving environment in the Anderson home. Will glanced at Noah, who was listening intently, his small face serious. Emma reached across and squeezed his hand. "We will demonstrate," James concluded, "that while Ms. Thompson may be Noah's biological aunt, the Anderson home currently represents his best chance for safety, stability, and emotional well-being." "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Simmons nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Before we proceed with witness testimony, I would like to speak with Noah privately in my chambers." He looked directly at the boy. Would that be all right with you, Noah? Noah looked startled, but nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Court will recess for 30 minutes while I speak with the child. Only Noah and the court-appointed guardian ad litem will be present. He banged his gavel once. We are in recess. As Noah was led away by the bailiff and the guardian, ad litem, a kind-faced woman who had been appointed to represent his interests independently of either party, Will felt a wave of anxiety. So much depended on what Noah might say in the judge's chambers. Emma clearly felt the same concern. Dad, she whispered urgently, what if Noah thinks he has to go with his aunt? What if he's too scared to tell the judge what he really wants? We have to trust Noah, Will replied, though his own confidence was wavering, and we have to trust the judge to see the truth. The 30-minute recess stretched into 45 minutes, then an hour. Will paced the hallway outside the courtroom, while James conferred with their expert witnesses, Dr. Martinez, Noah's tutor, and the child psychologist who had evaluated both children's emotional states. Patricia sat rigidly on a bench, Gloria Stevens whispering intently in her ear. Finally, the bailiff announced that court was back in session. Noah was already seated at their table when they returned, his expression unreadable. You okay? Will asked softly as he took his seat. Noah nodded but didn't elaborate. Before Will could press further, Judge Simmons entered and called the court to order. Having spoken with Noah, the judge began, I now wish to hear testimony from both Ms. Thompson and Dr. Anderson. Ms. Thompson, please take the stand. Patricia was sworn in and began her testimony, describing her relationship with Noah's father, her younger brother Anthony, and her deep affection for Noah since his birth. She spoke of the devastating loss of Anthony and his wife Maria in what she repeatedly called the tragic accident, carefully avoiding any specific details that might trigger Noah's trauma. I took Noah in immediately, Patricia testified. It was the natural thing to do. He's my blood. And why did you leave him to go to Chicago? Gloria Stevens prompted. I had an opportunity for a much better job there. Dental office management, with benefits and real career potential. Something I could support Noah with long-term. Patricia's voice trembled slightly. It was the hardest decision I ever made, leaving him temporarily. But Mrs. Ramirez, our neighbor for years, promised to take good care of him until I could send for him. And when you returned to Boston? I went straight to Mrs. Ramirez, but she told me Noah had run away months earlier. I was frantic. I searched everywhere, filed police reports, checked shelters. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. When I finally tracked him to Dr. Anderson's mansion, I was so relieved, until they refused to let me take him home. Will could barely contain his disbelief at this revised history. According to Noah, Patricia had left abruptly with her boyfriend, telling Noah he was too much trouble and that she might send for him someday if he learned to be less annoying. Under James's cross-examination, some of the inconsistencies in Patricia's story began to emerge. Ms. Thompson, did you provide Mrs. Ramirez with any financial support for Noah's care? Patricia shifted uncomfortably. We had an informal arrangement. So that's a no. Did you maintain regular contact with Noah during your time in Chicago? I called when I could. My job kept me very busy. According to phone records we've subpoenaed, you made exactly 2 calls to the Ramirez residence in the 11 months you were away. Would you characterize that as regular contact? Patricia's face hardened. I was establishing a better life for both of us. One final question, Ms. Thompson. Before today, when was the last time you saw Noah prior to discovering him at the Anderson residence? A long pause. Last summer. July 17th of last year, to be precise, making it nearly 10 months with no direct contact with your nephew. Thank you. No further questions. When Will took the stand, he spoke directly and honestly about how Noah had come into their lives, about the immediate connection between the children, and about his growing love for the boy who had brought such joy back into their home. Noah is extraordinarily gifted in his emotional intelligence, Will testified. He has an innate ability to connect with people who are suffering, to to help them find hope and purpose. Yes, he's helped Emma tremendously, but we've tried to help him equally, providing the stability, education, and loving environment every OA child deserves. Under Gloria Stevens's aggressive cross-examination, Will maintained his composure, even when she attempted to characterize Project Smile as exploitative and experimentally using one child to treat another. Project Smile was developed after we observed Noah's natural gifts, Will explained patiently. It's a structured program where children like Noah, those with exceptional empathy and resilience, can help other children facing similar traumas, all under proper medical supervision. Noah participates only when he wants to, and he takes tremendous pride in helping others. Isn't it convenient, Dr. Anderson, Stevens pressed, that this project also serves to justify your continued custody of Noah? Will met her gaze steadily. What would be convenient, Mrs. Stevens, would have been to ignore a homeless child sleeping in the park. What would have been convenient would be not to fight this battle in court, not to endure media scrutiny and questioning of my motives. I'm doing this because it's right for Noah, and yes, for Emma too. They heal each other in ways I could never have anticipated or engineered. After several more witnesses, including a powerful testimony from Mrs. Jenkins that left many in the courtroom discreetly wiping away tears, Judge Simmons called an unexpected witness. I'd like to hear from Emma Anderson, he announced. Given her age and medical condition, I'll allow her to testify from her current position rather than the witness stand. Emma looked startled but determined. She smoothed her dress and sat up straighter in her wheelchair as she was sworn in. Emma, the judge said gently, can you tell me about your friendship with Noah? Emma took a deep breath. Noah is my best friend and my brother, she said clearly. Before he came, I didn't want to try walking anymore because it hurt too much, and I thought I'd never get better. But Noah made it into a game. He said we were both superheroes in training and that superheroes never give up. And has Noah helped you in other ways? The judge prompted. Emma nodded eagerly. He reads to me when I have nightmares about the accident. He taught me magic tricks I can do even when my hands get tired, and he never, ever treats me like I'm broken. She reached for the scrapbook in her lap. I made this to show you what our family is like now. Judge Simmons accepted the scrapbook and took several minutes to flip through it, his expression softening as he examined the photographs and childish captions. There was Noah and Emma building a blanket fort in the library. Noah helping Mrs. Jenkins bake cookies, the children working on schoolwork together at the kitchen table, a series of photographs documenting Emma's progression from wheelchair to walker to crutches. This is very helpful, Emma. Thank you, the judge said finally. I have one more question. If Noah went to live with his aunt, how would you feel? Emma's chin trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. I would be very sad, but I would be even sadder for Noah because his aunt doesn't understand him. She thinks it's wrong that he likes to make people laugh and be happy, even after sad things happen. Gloria Stevens stood immediately. Objection, Your Honor. The child is repeating. Hearsay about my client. Sustained, Judge Simmons agreed. The court will disregard the characterization of Ms. Thompson. But his eyes lingered thoughtfully on Emma for a moment longer. After closing arguments from both attorneys, Judge Simmons announced that he would take the matter under advisement and issue his ruling the following morning. This is not a decision to be made hastily, he explained. I want to carefully review all testimony and evidence before determining what arrangement will best serve Noah's interests. That evening at the mansion was subdued. Noah picked at his dinner silently, while Emma kept casting worried glances at him. What did the judge ask you in his chambers? Will finally ventured when they were having dessert in the living room. Noah shrugged. Lots of things. About Aunt Patty, about living here, about my parents. He hesitated. He asked me where I want to live. Will's heart rate accelerated. And what did you tell him? The truth, Noah said simply, that I want to stay here with you and Emma and Mrs. Jenkins, that I'm happy here. Will exhaled slowly. Whatever happens tomorrow, Noah, I want you to know that we will always be your family, even if his voice caught. "Even if the judge decides you should live with your aunt, we will never stop caring about you. Never stop fighting for you." Noah nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I know." That night, after tucking both children into bed, Will found himself unable to sleep. He wandered down to the kitchen for a cup of tea and found Mrs. Jenkins already there, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "You should rest, Dr. Anderson," she admonished gently. "Tomorrow will be a difficult day, regardless of the outcome." Will slumped into a chair across from her. "I can't lose him, Mrs. Jenkins." The elderly housekeeper reached across the table and patted his hand, a gesture of familiarity she had never before attempted in all their years together. "That boy belongs here," she said firmly. "Any fool can see it. Let us hope Judge Simmons is not a fool." The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. News of the case had spread, and the gallery was packed with journalists, legal observers, and members of the public who had become invested in Noah's story. Noah sat between Will and James, his small shoulders rigid with tension. Across the aisle, Patricia sat alone. Gloria Stevens had been delayed and was rushing from another hearing. When Judge Simmons entered, a hush fell over the courtroom. He arranged his papers carefully before speaking. "After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, I am prepared to issue my ruling in the matter of Thompson versus Anderson regarding custody of the minor child, Noah Anthony Thompson." Her will reached for Noah's hand, finding it cold and trembling. "Family court cases are never simple," Judge Simmons began, "and this case presents particularly complex considerations. On one hand, we have a biological aunt with a legal claim to her nephew. On the other, we have a household where the child has clearly thrived emotionally and educationally." The judge looked directly at Noah. "Young man, I was deeply impressed by your maturity and thoughtfulness in our conversation yesterday. You have endured circumstances that would challenge most adults, yet you've maintained a remarkable capacity for joy and compassion." He turned to Patricia. "Ms. Thompson, the court acknowledges your biological connection to Noah and believes you care for him. However, there are troubling inconsistencies in your testimony regarding the circumstances of his care during your absence." Finally, he addressed Will. "Dr. Anderson, the court recognizes the genuine bond that has formed between Noah and your household and the positive environment you have provided." Judge Simmons folded his hands. "Feisig. Having weighed all factors, I find that Noah's best interests at this time would be served by remaining in the Anderson household under a legal guardianship arrangement with a review in 6 months to assess the situation." Will felt Noah's hand tighten in his as the boy released a shaky breath. "However," the judge continued, "I am also ordering structured visitation rights for Ms. Thompson, to be supervised initially and potentially expanded based on recommendations from the guardian. I'd like them." Patricia made a small sound of distress, her face flushing with anger or disappointment. "Additionally, I am requiring that Noah continue with his current therapy to address his parental loss, and that both the Andersons and Ms. Thompson participate in family counseling to determine if a healthier relationship can be established over time." The judge looked sternly at both parties. "Let me be clear. This arrangement prioritizes stability for a child who has already experienced significant disruption. It is not a victory for either party, but rather an attempt to create the most supportive environment for Noah while maintaining his connection to his biological family." With that, he banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in whispers and movement. James leaned over to explain the practical implications of the ruling, but Will was focused entirely on Noah, whose face had broken into a cautious smile. "I can stay," the boy whispered, as if afraid to believe it. Will pulled him into a tight hug. "You can stay." Across the aisle, Patricia was conferring intensely with Gloria Stevens, who had arrived just as the ruling was delivered. Their expressions suggested that this battle was far from over. But for now, for today, their family remained intact, and as Emma wheeled herself over to join their embrace, Will allowed himself to feel, for the first time in weeks, a cautious sense of hope. 15 years later. Dr. William Anderson stood at the podium, squinting slightly against the bright lights of the Harvard Medical School auditorium. At 60, his hair had turned completely silver, and lines of experience etched his face, but his eyes still held the same intensity and compassion that had defined his career. "It is my extraordinary privilege," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him, "to introduce our keynote speaker. She is not only a brilliant physician who graduated summa cum laude from this very institution, but also the driving force behind the revolutionary Anderson Protocol for pediatric neurorehabilitation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Emma Anderson." The audience erupted in applause as Emma strode confidently to the stage. At 21, she had become the youngest physician ever appointed to the staff of Massachusetts General Hospital's Department of Pediatric Neurology. Her walk, smooth and assured with only the faintest hint of the limp that had once confined her to a wheelchair, was itself a testament to the healing journey that had shaped her life's work. "Thank you, Dad," she said, embracing Will briefly, before turning to address the packed auditorium. "And thank you all for being here today for the 15th anniversary celebration of the Smile Foundation." From his seat in the front row, Noah Thompson beamed with pride. Now 23, he had grown into a handsome young man whose charismatic presence and emotional intelligence had only deepened with age. His recently completed doctoral dissertation in psychology at Boston University, "The Impact of Peer-Facilitated Joy Therapy on Trauma Recovery in Pediatric Patients," had already been accepted for publication in 3 prestigious journals. 15 years ago, Emma continued, her voice clear and confident, a chance encounter between a homeless boy and a paralyzed girl sparked what would eventually become a global movement in pediatric rehabilitation. What began as Project Smile in a single Boston hospital has now expanded to over 200 medical facilities across 15 countries, touching the lives of more than 2 million children. Will glanced down the road to where Olivia Clark, now 22, was filming the speech on her tablet. The first of the additional children who had eventually joined their unconventional family, Olivia had been a 7-year-old who had lost her parents in a house fire and had completely lost the ability to speak or smile. Now, she was a poised young woman whose online platform connecting children in need around the world had revolutionized how resources were distributed to vulnerable populations. Beside her sat Madison "Maddie" Taylor, 27, whose exceptional organizational skills had transformed the Smile Foundation from a local initiative into a global enterprise. Once a 12-year-old who had spent years bouncing between foster homes, Maddie now served as the Foundation's Chief Operations Officer, her strategic brilliance ensuring that every dollar reached those who needed it most. Emma's voice grew, more passionate as she outlined the scientific validation that had finally silenced their critics. The longitudinal study published in the New England Journal of Medicine last year confirmed what we've known intuitively all along, that peer-facilitated joy therapy produces measurable neurological improvements in children with traumatic injuries. The data doesn't lie. Patients in the Smile protocol recover 37% faster than those in traditional therapy alone. Will couldn't help but think about the long, difficult road that had led to this moment. After the initial custody ruling, Patricia Thompson had indeed continued her legal battle, filing appeals and generating fresh waves of media scrutiny. But something unexpected had happened during the court-mandated family counseling sessions. Patricia had slowly begun to witness the genuine love and stability that Noah had found with the Andersons. The turning point came 6 months after the initial ruling, when Patricia arrived for a supervised visit to find Noah teaching Emma to stand without crutches for the first time. Watching her niece's determination and her nephew's gentle encouragement, something had shifted in Patricia's perception. She never formally abandoned her legal claim, but her pursuit became increasingly half-hearted until, 3 years later, she moved to Florida with a new husband, maintaining only holiday contact with Noah. Project Smile had faced its own uphill battle for legitimacy. The medical establishment had initially dismissed it as feel-good pseudoscience, and the press continued to question Will's motives at every turn. Conservative medical journals published scathing critiques of the unqualified children being allowed to influence treatment protocols. Hospital administrators resisted implementation, fearing liability. Schools declined participation, concerned about parental backlash. Only through years of meticulous documentation, rigorous scientific studies, and the undeniable results demonstrated by thousands of children did the SMILE protocol gradually gain acceptance. The breakthrough came when the methodology was adopted by the prestigious Mayo Clinic, whose independent study confirmed the remarkable outcomes that the Andersons had been reporting for years. Public perception shifted more dramatically after a devastating earthquake in Haiti, where SMILE Foundation volunteers, including a teenage Noah, had arrived among the first responders. International news coverage showed Noah and other trained peer facilitators working with traumatized children, coaxing smiles and hope from the depths of despair. The images of children laughing amid the rubble, finding moments of joy even in the darkest circumstances, had captured the world's imagination and finally silenced many of the cynics. The science matters, Emma was saying now, bringing Will's attention back to the present. The data matters, but what matters most are the individual stories. The child who takes her first steps after being told she never would walk again. The boy who speaks his first words after months of traumatic silence. The teenager who finds purpose in becoming a peer facilitator for younger children facing the same challenges he once conquered. She gestured to Noah, who stood to enthusiastic applause. My brother wasn't just the first SMILE facilitator, he was living proof that our greatest wounds can become our greatest gifts to others. His philosophy, that when we make others happy, we heal ourselves, has transformed not just individual lives, but entire approaches to pediatric trauma recovery. Noah acknowledged the applause with a modest nod, never entirely comfortable in the spotlight despite his natural charisma. Will felt his chest tighten with pride for both of his remarkable children, one by birth, one by choice, both extraordinary in their own ways. After the ceremony, the expanded Anderson family gathered at the mansion in Beacon Hill. Mrs. Jenkins, now 85 but still formidable, had insisted on preparing the celebration dinner herself, though she grudgingly accepted assistance from Maddie and Olivia. "To think I almost didn't let that ragamuffin through the front door," she remarked to Will as they watched Noah regaling a group of young SMILE Foundation facilitators with one of his legendary inspirational talks in the garden. "Greatest mistake I nearly made in my life." "We've all come a long way," Will agreed, his gaze moving to Emma, who was deep in discussion with colleagues from around the world who had traveled to Boston for the anniversary celebration. The mansion itself had evolved over the years, transformed from a somber monument to success into a warm, vibrant home that frequently hosted gatherings of children involved in the Foundation's programs. The formal sitting rooms had given way to comfortable, accessible spaces where children of all abilities could play and interact. The once manicured garden now featured wheelchair-accessible paths, adaptive play equipment, and the original parallel bars where Emma had taken her first post-injury steps, preserved as a symbol of possibility for newly injured children visiting the home. The most significant transformation, however, had occurred within Will himself. The driven surgeon who had once measured success in professional accolades and financial achievements had discovered a deeper purpose in nurturing not just his expanded family, but the global community that had grown around them. He had gradually reduced his surgical practice to focus on the SMILE Foundation, using his medical expertise and influence to open doors that might otherwise have remained closed to such an innovative approach. As the evening progressed, Will found himself on the terrace with Noah, both men gazing up at the stars, visible despite the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts, Dr. Anderson?" Noah asked, slipping into the formal address he sometimes used teasingly. Will smiled. "I was just thinking about that first day at the hospital. Did you know, even then, what you were doing, when you made Emma laugh?" Noah considered this. "Not consciously. I just saw a sad girl in a wheelchair, and I knew what it felt like to be sad." He shrugged. "Making people laugh was how I survived after losing my parents. It was the only thing that made me feel better." You've turned that insight into a methodology that's helping children around the world, Will said. Your parents would be incredibly proud. I like to think so. Noah was quiet for a moment. You know, I used to worry that I was forgetting them, their faces, their voices, but then I realized that every time I help a child find joy after trauma, I'm honoring their memory in the most meaningful way possible. The French doors opened and Emma joined them, champagne flute in hand. What are you two brooding about out here? The party's inside. Just having a moment of reflection, Will explained. 15 years is quite a milestone. And we're just getting started, Emma said, with the characteristic determination that had fueled her remarkable recovery and subsequent achievements. The neuroplasticity research coming out of the Singapore branch is groundbreaking. We're seeing evidence that joy-facilitated therapy actually creates new neural pathways in injured brains. Noah grinned. Always the scientist. Someone has to provide the data to back up your charm, she retorted affectionately. Will watched his children, because that's what they both were, regardless of biology, with a heart full of gratitude. The journey had not been easy. They had faced legal battles, media scrutiny, professional skepticism, and personal challenges. Noah had endured bullying at school when classmates learned of his background. Emma had fought against accusations that her medical school acceptance was due to her father's influence rather than her own brilliance. Olivia and Maddie had weathered their own storms of adjustment and identity. But through it all, they had persevered, supported each other, and transformed their individual traumas into a collective force for healing. The ringing of a spoon against glass drew their attention back inside, where Maddie was calling for everyone's attention. The gathered crowd, foundation staff, medical professionals, former patients, current facilitators, quieted as she began to speak. I have an announcement, Maddie said, her organizational efficiency evident even in this personal moment. We received word this morning, but we wanted to save it for tonight's celebration. She paused, building anticipation. The Smile Foundation has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for its pioneering work in global childhood trauma recovery. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Will felt Noah's hand grip his shoulder in shock, while Emma's eyes filled with tears. While the nomination itself is an honor, Maddie continued once the noise had subsided, what matters most is the recognition of what we've all known for 15 years, that healing happens not just through medical intervention, but through human connection, through joy shared in the darkest moments, through the simple act of one child helping another remember how to smile. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the younger facilitators had been settled in the Foundation's adjoining guest house, the core Anderson family gathered in the kitchen, the heart of their home where so many important moments had unfolded over the years. Mrs. Jenkins, defying her age, was making her famous hot chocolate. Olivia was showing Maddie designs for a new app to connect hospitalized children with peer facilitators remotely. Emma was reviewing research data on her tablet, while Noah sketched ideas for a new training program targeting adolescent facilitators. Will leaned against the doorframe, taking in the scene with profound contentment. From the greatest tragedy of his life, the loss of Elizabeth, and Emma's injury, had come this extraordinary family and the global movement they had built together. "Dad, come look at this," Emma called, waving him over to see a video testimonial from a 10-year-old girl in Kenya who had regained mobility after participating in the Smile Protocol. She's walking with just one crutch now, after doctors said she'd never stand again. As Will watched the beaming child demonstrate her progress, he thought about the long chain of events that had led to this moment. A homeless boy making funny faces in a hospital garden, a paralyzed girl laughing for the first time in years, a rigid housekeeper softening her heart, a suspicious aunt gradually recognizing what was truly best for her nephew, a skeptical medical establishment finally acknowledging the power of joy in healing. "You know what my dad used to say?" Noah remarked, overhearing their conversation. "He said that impossible just means you haven't found the right way yet." He smiled, the same infectious smile that had first broken through Emma's depression, all those years ago. I think we found the right way." "Indeed we did," Will agreed, looking around at the extraordinary family that fate, compassion, and determination had built. One smile at a time. As the Nobel Prize nominations circulated in the press over the subsequent weeks, media outlets that had once questioned Will's motives now celebrated the Foundation's achievements. Former critics acknowledged the transformative impact of the Smile Protocol on pediatric rehabilitation worldwide. Even Dr. Harold Reynolds, now retired but still influential, published a formal retraction of his earlier criticisms, admitting that the Anderson methodology had revolutionized our understanding of the mind-body connection in trauma recovery. The ultimate validation, however, came not from institutional recognition, but from the countless letters, emails, and social media posts from children and families whose lives had been changed through the Foundation's work. Their stories of Aichi, first steps taken, first words spoken, first smiles reclaimed after tragedy, formed a tapestry of hope that stretched across continents and cultures. On a crisp autumn evening, 6 months after the anniversary celebration, the Anderson family gathered once again in their garden. Emma had just returned from opening a new Smile Center in Mumbai, Noah from a training program in Stockholm, Olivia from a tech conference in Tokyo, and Maddie from a Foundation Board meeting in London. Their global impact continued to expand, but they always returned to the place where it had all begun. As twilight descended over Boston, Will raised his glass in a toast. "To finding family in unexpected places," he said, "and to the power of a single smile to change the world." Noah, now preparing to lead the Foundation's international expansion while completing his second doctorate, added his own toast. "To the impossible becoming possible." Emma, whose pioneering research continued to push the boundaries of neurological rehabilitation, smiled at her brother, the boy who had taught her to walk again, to laugh again, to believe in miracles again, to making others happy as the surest path to healing ourselves. Olivia, whose voice had returned so powerfully that she now narrated the Foundation's documentary films, raised her glass. To being heard, even in silence. Maddie, whose organizational genius had transformed a local project into a global movement, concluded simply, "To home, wherever and however we find it." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Will Anderson looked at the extraordinary family created not by blood but by love, compassion, and the unwavering belief in every child's capacity for joy, even in the face of tremendous adversity. From a single moment of connection between a homeless boy and a paralyzed girl had grown a worldwide movement that continued to redefine the possibilities of healing. And it had all begun with a simple, universal truth that an 8-year-old orphan